Well, tonight the workshop is about working with watercolors to create a coastal beach scene. But it's one where there's, when the ocean is just roiling and it's it's splashing against the rocks, and so you have water flying and everything. I love that look, right? And so I created some of those paintings. This is one of the paintings that I created. Do you see the splashing right there? And if I move it around in the light, you'll even see some iridescence because when the water splashes, if the sun's out, it's going to sparkle, right? That water. And so I like using the sparkle watercolor together with that. This is another one that I did. Look at the like that color of the blue and the aqua. It just makes me so happy to look at it. I do live near the ocean. I walk by the water all the time. So, I love that look. And here we've got the splashes right here on the rocks. And again, we've got that sparkle in there. And this one is done on rough paper. Those other two were done on regular watercolor paper. This is a rough watercolor paper. So it gives you a little bit different feel to it, but it still looks, it still gives you that feeling that you're near the rocks. And then this is a larger one that I have. You see the splash right there. So these are this concept of the splashing on the rocks is from a book. Imagine that, me and books, right? Yes. So I got the idea for that look from this book, and it's called Painting the Impressionistic Landscape. The author is Dustan Knight. And you can see all my little tabs up here. So she talks about these colorful but very impressionistic florals, but she also does these sea landscapes. So I'm going to show you one of the. Now, this is based off of these flowers are nasturtiums, and I'm growing nasturtiums in my garden so I can take some pictures and use her techniques to get that very impressionistic sort of flower. But in toward the back of the book, she also has these incredible, let me see if I can find the first page of that, these incredible seascapes. So here it says painting the rocks and sea. And then you see how it just has a very soft, there's a lot of white in there. You've got some rocks, but it's very much an impression, right? And that just, saw that and I was like, okay, that's incredibly cool. I love it. See here how she's using purple in there? If I get up close, you can see the purple. So it's very unconventional and very impressionistic what it is that she's doing. So this, for instance, is a photo of the water splashing up on the rocks there. And so she does lots of sketching and uses that as inspiration. You can see some of her basic sketches, right? You just sort of need to put in where the rocks are and then just build the water all around that. So that's what using some of the techniques from her book, I'm going to be showing you how I made those other paintings. Let me see if there's another one here that is just gorgeous, right? To me, that makes my heart sing. Those colors and the fact that there's a lot of movement and energy in it. That's the way that I like to paint myself. So she has several demonstrations in here, one with watercolor and one with acrylics. And so depending on what type of medium you like to use, she's got your step by steps with pictures and everything here, which is fabulous. And there are hands on the back of the book. Oink, and another one of those seascapes. So that attracted me. Besides the florals, these seascapes really attracted me to her book. Again, painting the impressionistic landscape. And I will have on YouTube after the workshop is over, I go back in and I put links. So I will put a link to this book so that if you want to purchase it for yourself and, check out her eye candy that is like just so beautiful. But it's definitely right now. I have probably over 400 art books in my collection, but right now this is one of my favorites. So I thought I'd share a one of the projects in there with you, or the project techniques. So what I did was I went out to um, Pixabay. So I like to use two websites for copyright free or royalty free images, and that's Pixabay and Unsplash. And so these were images from Pixabay, and you see how there are like the rocks and the whiteness here. Now, this one happens to have sky in it as well. And then this one right here, right? Just I'll go. I typed in seascape, coastline, rocks, splashing. I like that. Those were kind of the keywords that I put into Pixabay in order to get these kinds of images in order to use them as inspiration for doing these abstracted seascapes. Is that this one's fun? I like this. This one's different because in the other ones that I did, the rocks were more down in this area. And this one I think's interesting because the rocks are up top. And this one I found interesting because there's a body in it, a person in it, watching the splashes. And so I think that would be a lot of fun to do too. We're not going to do that tonight. We're just going to do the seascape. We're not going to try to put people in it, but I wanted to show you some of the imagery that you can find out on those royalty-free websites. Now, tonight, what supplies are we going to use to create these energetic and colorful seascapes? Well, I'm going to be using core watercolors. So you can use any watercolors. This is what the core watercolors look like. Oops, let me give you a full tube. That one's, most of the way done. But here's what a tube looks like, QOR. These are, let me see, I think they're made in the USA. The core company, core is from Golden Paints. Let's see. I know that Golden is from the USA, so I'm pretty sure that they're made in the USA. Isn't that funny? I don't see it right on the tube right here. It does say US patent number though, because Core watercolors use their own patented um, dispersing agent instead of just gum arabic, because a lot of brands use gum arabic as their base. Well, the Golden Company for the Core watercolors has created their own base they call Aquazol, and it lists it right on the tube right here. But that what I like about that is it allows the colors to be super bright, and it also allows the colors to disperse more than your typical watercolors. And because a typical watercolor will spread, but these like burst right out. And so I love the core colors for that reason. And what I've done, as you can see with this one, where it's almost empty, I've put it into, this is a Christy Rice palette that I received empty. So she has a couple of different really pretty designs on them. And so here are the colors that I have put in here. You can see that I was like, oh my gosh, I have one empty spot. Okay, what am I going to get? I had to look through their whole collection. I'm like, okay, okay, okay. I'm going to get green gold, which is not on here, but a different kind of green to go right there. And so this is what it looks like right here. And what I've done is I've taken these tubes and I've squeezed the color into these are called half pans. A full pan is twice the size. Okay. The nice thing about having a palette like this to put your paint into is that you can pop these out. So let me see if I can show you how to pop one of these. There's a little ridge right along here, and you just push against the ridge and lift, and you're able to pop them out. See that? So that is a half pan. And what I've done is I've used a marker. Did I do that? I did not. Normally I use a marker and I write on here the brand and the color, but I just recently put this whole thing together and I know it's all core watercolors. So it's helpful to make a swatch sheet for yourself. And that's just a piece of watercolor paper that I cut down and that will fit inside here so that I can store it together with this travel palette. So those are the watercolors we're going to be using. We're also going to be using a white. So most of the time you're going to see that um, they do have something called titanium white often in your better watercolors or Chinese white, but I find those aren't, yes, it'll lighten up your colors, but they are not thick enough to create that spray look that we're looking for. So there are two types of paint that I find work better for creating that spray. One is gouache. So this is a Pebeo gouache, so more of a student grade gouache, and this is a Winsor Newton gouache. So both of those are an opaque watercolor. They're called opaque watercolor. And so these are the titanium whites, and they work pretty well, but there's one thing that I've found that works even better. And so for any illustrator, if you've gone to school for illustration, you know about this product. It is the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. And so when you're working on watercolors or water media like that, sometimes you need to bring back the white and have that bold, bright white. So this is a thick it's a thick pot of white that will sit on top of your watercolors, and it's called bleed proof because normally watercolor will bleed back up through your colors, which is often what happens even with gouache. But if you use bleed proof white, it sits on top of your watercolor, and that's how I got the spray. Let me see if I can grab one of those. That's how I got the spray on here. If you see the white little tiny dots here, that is bleed proof white. That's my favorite one for doing the sprays. And I'm going to be showing you how to do that spray. So that's one of the techniques. I'm teaching you three techniques tonight, three watercolor techniques. So the spray is one of them. Another one is using something called a wax crayon. So this is a wax crayon. Actually, do I have a whole one? This is the set that I got it out of. But you could also just use a candle. You know, if you have a candle that is either white or like a kind of a clearish color, then you can use a candle. It's just wax. You're just looking for wax. But here you can find, oftentimes in hobby stores, you can find a wax crayon like this. These are considered to be clear wax crayons. And so that's what you use on the paper to create a resist that then when you put the paint over top of it, you it will bead up off of those lines with your crayons. So that's the other thing that we're going to be doing today is using the crayon. I'm going to show you how to do that to create that resist. What I've shown you before to create the resist was a masking fluid. And so you certainly can use a masking fluid, but for this particular application, which is that sort of very impressionistic ocean scene, I find that using the wax works better than using the masking fluid. You can absolutely use the masking fluid if that's what you have on hand. But I find most people have a candle, like a clear, like one that's colorless or white. And so you can use the candle as well. So the third technique that I'm going to be showing you is scraping. So you want to have some sort of hard card, either a card like this, or you can also do it with a palette knife. And that's once you put the watercolor down, you scrape through the watercolor And that's why I like to keep old hotel keys and stuff like that, because I cut them up and use them for this technique. And so we're going to be doing that as well on the rocks to get some jagged edges, because normally those kind of rocks have jagged edges, right? Now, the watercolor paper that I'm going to be working with tonight, this is the Jack Richardson 135 pounds. So normally I work on this one, which is the Canson XL watercolor paper, 140 pounds. And so this is a perfect paper for this project as well. But I really enjoy this, the Jack Richardson. You see where it's 50 sheets. So it's very economical when you're experimenting with a new technique to get paper that is, well, this one's 135 pounds instead of being 140 pounds. Plus, they come in 50 sheet sets. This size, which is 6 by 9, and the 4 by 6s that I use all the time, and they're super economical. So that's why I wanted to tell you about these papers. And it's an excellent watercolor paper. You can use it for finished artwork. You can use it for practice. The thing is, you're getting like a huge, huge stack of it when you buy it. It's awesome. Awesome paper. So that's the paper we're going to use tonight. Although I did also want to show you the rough paper. You know how I showed you the one that was completed, the one that's done here on the rough paper. And sometimes I like the way that the rough paper takes the paint. It's a little different. So both Leather Village and this company Wanderings have this rough handmade paper. So it looks like this. They come in stacks usually of 10 or 25. I always buy them 25 at a time, but they're super rough and they're handmade. So they have this nice rough edge to them. And so that's called a decal edge. Decal edge. And then the rough surface, once you've kind of perfected what you're doing on the flat paper or the cold press, one that we're going to be looking at, you might want to consider something like trying a textured paper, because I really like the way the textured paper looks when the paint is put on that. Let's see, what else are we going to be using? We're also going to be using shimmer watercolors. So this is one that I've shown before. It's by Gansai Kuretake, and it's the Gansai Tambi. This is their gold set, they call it, and they call this white gold. Isn't that fun? So that's just a plain iridescent. That's my favorite one to use with this. But if you're trying to give the idea of the sun glinting off of the water, you might want to use one of these other gold ones, like even this one right here is a very light gold, but we're going to spatter the that iridescent. Another iridescent color that I like to use, I have the, do you recognize that? Again, this is a Christy Rice. It comes empty, empty palette. And then I filled it with a whole bunch of, those are shimmer watercolors. So I get handmade shimmer watercolors from folks, as well as this is the CSY company, and that's all shimmer watercolors there as well. So I take these greens and these blues, and I also spatter that into there too, because why not? More is more for me when it comes to watercolor. I can't help it. Okay, let me set those shimmer ones aside. And of course, we're going to be using water and brushes. So this is for this particular project, when you're working on this size, this 6 by 9 or 9 by 12, this is a Princeton Neptune brush. This is a synthetic squirrel. So that's that black, right? And what I like is, do you see the shape of the brush there? That's, they call it an oval wash, or some people also call it a cat's tongue, the way it comes to sort of a little bit of a point right there, right? Because this is what I call a brush, a wash brush. And this is also Neptune oval wash, but you see how it's more oval? And this one has a little more of a tip to it right there. That's why a lot of people call this the cat's tongue brush. And so for what we're going to be doing, I find that this particular shape and the size is a 1/2 inch is excellent. Now, if I were on bigger paper, I would just use this same shape, but I would use a bigger one, which, like I said, I have big brushes here. This is another Princeton Neptune brush. See how fluffy that is? So this is a big one that I would use on a large piece of paper. But tonight we're working on a smaller piece of paper. So this 1/2 inch is the perfect size. And you can always come in with, if you don't have that shape, you can always come in with just a regular, right, pointed brush like that. Or another fun shape that you can use is, well, here, an angle brush. Angle brushes are great. I love the angle brush shape. So this is a 1/2 inch angle brush from the Velvet Touch line. And then see this shape right here? This sort of long, thin, it's nice and soft. So this is also one of the Princeton Velvet Touch brushes, and that works really well as well. So don't worry, I'll have these different brushes linked in the description of the video. That Velvet Touch line is so great, Flower Gazer said. Absolutely. I adore their brushes. And I just discovered that I'm missing one shape. And I'm like, where the heck is my filbert? Uh, it's probably in the bowels of one of my bags here somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it. And the filbert has the rounded top. I probably have one close by, don't I? Well, this is um, a dramatic big one, but you see how it's rounded here? That's called a filbert. So I don't know where my filbert is for my Velvet Touch. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I may have to buy another one. Imagine that. I only have like jars and jars of brushes, right? But yes, the Velvet Touch, and also, to me, anything from the Princeton brush line is excellent. And so this one that I was showing you, the Neptune, has the synthetic squirrel hair, but the Velvet Touch is using the Tacklon nylon hair. Both excellent, both excellent. And there's another, well, they have several brush lines. Another one is called Aqua Elite, and I have a whole set of Aqua Elite, but I'm waiting to do a review on the Aqua Elite brushes, and then I'll start using them here at my desk. Another thing that we're going to use is a pencil of some sort. I generally don't use a pencil for this kind of technique, but I think that to show you what I'm doing, and for you, if it's one of your first times doing this technique, it can be helpful to have a pencil. And then we're definitely going to use an old ratty toothbrush because that's how we're going to spatter when we get to that point. Okay. And then on my desk, I like to use this is the Faber-Castell click and go. So it's silicone, and you can push it down and it becomes just this thin, and that's what it's a travel water container. And I love it because I can put my brushes here on that scallop top. If I'm using multiple brushes, I can just put my brushes on there. So they are great. So you're going to need some sort of water container. But other than that, that's everything. And I'm just looking to see if there's anything else sitting around me here. There's one more thing. I have this Corel dish here because I like to color mix. Now, that's in case I need it. I may or may not need it because when you're looking in at a travel watercolor set, um, you'll notice that there's some room here for, you see that? There's room for color mixing, and that's what I was doing over here. I just find sometimes when I'm at my desk, if I'm traveling, that's what I use for my color mixing. But if I'm at my desk, I find I really like to have these open Corel dishes like this. This is the 10.5 inch, what do they call it? It's a rectangular tray, but they call it something where it's like rounded edge rectangular tray. But I'll put a link to it in the description of the video if it's something that you want to take a look at later. Let me just move a few things around here. We're going to go over top of the table and get started. So exciting. I like the orientation of horizontal, although you can go vertical because this one is a 9 by 12 and I went vertical on that one. So you absolutely can go vertical with these, but I am going to try to work horizontal, which is my favorite. So I'm just going to use these for inspiration here. And I really like this one at the bottom because we have some clouds in the background. We have a little different blue up here in the sky than we do of the ocean. Okay. So let me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that picture and I print these in a size 5 by 7 on my printer. And then I tell it to put uh, 2 on a page. And so that way I can easily fold this like this. And then I have this image or this image. It just makes it easier to work with on my table. So I'm going to put that up above me and use it as inspiration for what it is that we're going to do here. So I'm going to start out creating, I'm going to decide with my pencil where I want my rocks. And then I'm going to use the wax in order to preserve some of the white. Okay, so let's see where this goes here. And this comes, these are the rocks, comes sort of out here and down to the ocean. And then it's coming back this way. I'm leaving a little bit of room here where there's some splashing going on. And then we've got another set of rocks that come down like this and out. And then there's a little ledge. And then this comes back this way. So we've got our 2 sets of rocks. In the background here, I've got a horizon going. You know what? I'm going to bring the horizon up a little bit. We're artists, we're allowed to do that. So I'm going to bring my horizon up to here. Okay. Now, what I do is I will erase, I make those initial lines to kind of give me a guide. And then I'm going to erase, like I don't want this line to the where the horizon is to be too noticeable. So I'm just going to use a white eraser. This is my favorite, the Staedtler Mars uh, erasers. And I'm going to erase most of the line. So you may not be able to see it in the camera, but live with me sitting here, I can see it. So I can leave these rocks here. I can leave that black, the darker line there, or I can choose again to go over it just a little bit in order to take some of the harshness of those black lines out of there. Okay, here we go. Just like that. So there are lines there, but they're not as harsh as they were. Oh, and by the way, Flower Gazer, I got the book. I think you're probably still in the stream. I got the book. Um, and it's so stinking cute. The illustrations are gorgeous. I cannot wait to take it. The next time I go over to my daughter's house with my grandsons, I'm going to take it to them and sign it to one of them. So, hey, I'm so excited. Thank you. Oh, if y'all are watching and you didn't know, Flower Gazer is an author, an illustrator, and she used watercolor to illustrate her latest book. If you, Flower Gazer, will put the name of the book in the chat, then I can shout out the name of the book for you, and that would be amazing. Yes, absolutely. Love to support. Love to support. We all support the artistic community. We have to support each other, right? Mm. Okay, so now I've got my very light lines in there. Actually, there's one more place there, and got it. Um, okay, so I've got a basic feel for where I want things now. And according to the picture, now I'm going to look at the picture and see where is the water splashing. Now, I don't necessarily have to only have the water splash where it's showing here. I may want to zhuzh it up and add some more splashing in order to uh, get um, a more dramatic composition. But we've got splashing over here on the rocks. We've got some splashing up here, and then there's some splashing over here, some white, right? So wherever there's that white, that's where I want to put this uh, crayon or is that what this, yeah, they call it a wax crayon. So you can see I wore it down the last time I used it. So I'm gonna expose some more of it here. Oops. All right, let me just use this and I should be able to expose some more of that wax. So like I said, if you don't have a wax crayon like this, a clear wax crayon, you can use a white wax crayon. You can use a candlestick. See, it's just that wax. Tiny seeds, big dreams, how do flowers grow? Right. Exactly. And all you have to do is search for the author Flower Gazer. And it's Tiny Seeds, Big Dreams. How do flowers grow? Such a cute book. Love it. I cannot wait to share it with my grandsons. How do they do a heart these days? Heart. Love that. Okay, so here is I exposed some more of the wax. So on my paper, I'm going to look at where those areas are that I want splashes. And I can do and you want to press pretty hard with this. Okay. So I'm gonna make some splash marks here. And it's not going to be easy to see because it's clear wax. But I can see it, and that's part of the fun of this is you just have to kind of go for it and figure it out on the back end. How you can always, right? We're going to be adding that more of the white with the spatter at the end. So you just want to get in some places here where there's some spatter coming in. And then we have the waves are like coming along here. So I am literally just making marks. Now, if you want to see where you've made your marks, you can hold it up like this to the light, and then you can see where your wax marks are. So there's also, I want spray coming up over here. So I'm putting some spray there. And there's another set of waves right over here. So I'm putting the wax in there. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there we go. And then there's another row. I'm going to put some more spray, even though it's not in the picture. I'm going to put some more spray coming this way here on this rock. And then I'm going to put another row of sort of a wave in here. All right. Now that's for the waves. Putting the wax on there. The wax is going to act as a resist to the watercolor paint. But then I also want to put some, hey there, Kim Sue, welcome in, welcome in. I also want to put some on the rocks because um, the water will sheet off the rocks. But before we do that, we're going to paint a little bit of paint on the rocks. Now, another thing is up here, there are clouds. Do you see the clouds here? So I'm going to put in a little bit, I'm going to use instead of a motion up and down like this for the splash, and the waves, I'm going to use a circular motion for the clouds. So up in this area, this one's going to have the clouds up here, and then all the way near the top, we're going to have this beautiful cerulean kind of blue. So I'm sort of looking at the pictures and following along with what do the clouds look like, going in little circles like this and building up some of that. And when we put the cerulean over top of it, the cerulean will just fall off of this wax. But I'm building up some clouds like this. And I'm looking at it from the side because that's what I need to do in order to see where the heck did I put my, where did I put the wax? Okay, a little bit more up here and around. We also have to bear in mind, how are we going to mat this piece? Because the where the mat goes also makes a difference, right? In how you're going to mat the artwork. So let me show you that, for instance, here. This piece will be matted in an 8 by 10 with a skinny edge to it. So normally a normal 8 by 10 mat looks like this, where you have wider. And so this fits a 5 by 7 image. So if you're working on 5 by 7 paper, you want a regular 8 by 10 mat. But if you're working on a 6 by 9, which is what this is, this paper, you're going to need a mat that has a hole that will accommodate a 6 by 9. And then as you're working, I keep these next to me as I'm working, because then I go ahead and I put it on there and I decide, ooh, where are things going to be? And am I staying within the area that I want to for the mat that I'm going to end up putting my artwork in? So that can be a consideration. All right, so we've got lots of wax on there. Now I am going to put more wax on the rocks, but we're going to start by putting some color on the rocks. So the rocks by the beach generally look almost black or brown like this. And sometimes they have some seaweed in them, right? So I'm going to start out with this uh, 1/2 inch oval wash Neptune. I'm getting it wet. Ooh, another thing we need, of course, is paper towels. So let me grab a paper towel here because I tap a lot. Now, I've got in my set here some browns and some darks. So let me show you. I've got the natural umber. Again, these are core watercolors. So natural umber, red oxide, and yellow oxide. Those are my browns. Okay. And then this Indian yellow, which has that sort of it looks like turmeric, doesn't it, in there? That's the Indian yellow. So these are the ones I'm going to be working with right now while I'm building the rocks. But because the rocks have a little bit of seaweed usually attached to them, I'm going to go in with some of this cobalt green as well. So my cobalt green is right here. And I'm going to put a little bit of that in here. And I'm actually going to add just a touch of yellow to it to kind of lighten it up just a little bit. There we go. And then so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting some of this green in here to mimic the um, that seaweed growing on the rocks. Okay. So, and I'm going to make it darker in the background here. Actually, let's get a little bit of that. There we go. So just do your strokes, like you don't have to be so purposeful with your strokes if you're doing impressionism, which is what we're working on right now. So do you see where the wax is resisting? Ah, it's so fun. There's some wax resistance going on there, and that's fine. That's good. That's all good. Now we're going to go ahead and put the sky in right here. So that's the next thing to do this. Now, one of the things I do a lot is I will clean up my areas that I'm working on here. So I'll just give myself a little room here like this, pick up some of that color. And now because we need to let this dry for a moment. and then we're going to come back and put another layer on and we're going to scrape it. So while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and put some blue up here in the sky. And the blue that's up there is this sort of really amazing. Now, this is called cobalt teal, this color. Oh, so pretty and soft. But I'm going to add to it this color called manganese blue. The manganese blue by itself to me is a little bit too strong. So that's why I use it with a little bit of the cobalt teal. So I'm going to get my brush pretty wet. That's the nice thing about the imitation squirrel hair here. Brush head of the Neptunes is it holds a lot of water. And that's what you want for this kind of project. You want it to hold a lot of water. So you may not be able to see it, but I can see the little line here. And that little line is the sky, right? So I'm going to start out up here. Oh, that color is just gorgeous. But you'll see as I put it over top of where the wax is, that the wax is going to begin to resist it. Now, the wax doesn't necessarily completely resist it because it depends on how thick the paint is and how much water there is. So what I like to do is take my paper towel and I go back in the areas where those clouds are, and I pick up that paint so that we get some nice variation over those clouds. So do you see that? So the clouds are not perfectly white of the paper, but they're definitely, you can tell that that's what they are as clouds. Now I just added a whole bunch more water to my brush because the darkest is up here and then it's going to be a little bit lighter down along the horizon line. So I just added more water to my brush and I'm bringing that along the horizon line right here. Okay, yee, there we are. And then again, I'm going to go over top of where the clouds are, and I'm going to soak up some of that color so that my clouds can show up. There they are. So there's our background. Hey, hey, just like that. Easy peasy. And I like it. I like it. There's a little bit of, there's some areas here where it's a little bit dark. So I'm just going to do that. I don't want that, straight line across there. I want it to sort of blend in. There we go. Nice. Nice. Ooh, I'm happy already. And so now we have our sky in. Oh my goodness. Fabulous. The next thing is we're going to work again on the rocks. So a lot of this is pretty much dry because I just put in a very small amount, right, of color there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with something that's a little more brown on the rocks. But we're going to build up the layers. So we don't have to do it um, too dark, okay? We're okay to be a light brown instead of a dark brown because we're going to put multiple layers on the rocks. So one of the colors that I like that's a very earthy color is called yellow oxide. So this color I'm dipping into right now is called yellow oxide. And you're going to see here that it has kind of a yellow tint to it. So it's a very earthy color like that. But it's not quite dark enough for me. So there's another color that I have that's called red oxide. So this was yellow oxide, very earthy. There's another color called red oxide, and it just deepens the color just a little bit. So there's a yellow version and a red version of oxides. And So now we've got this beautiful sort of warm mustardy color. And now I don't necessarily need to cover the whole rock. I'm just going to bring some of the, cover some of it. It's okay to have brush marks where people can see that you've actually put brush to paper. And so here, I'm going to do some more of that here, bring it out, and just do some random brush marks, okay? So I'm not necessarily covering the whole thing because we're going to be doing multiple layers. Now, I have to wait just a moment for that to to um, begin to set up, but not completely. And then you're going to take your part of a credit card or some sort of or your palette knife. Let's try the palette. Nope, we're going to do the credit card first, then we'll do the palette knife. So I'm just going to scrape like this, and I'm pulling down or to the side because that's going to create these interesting little ridges and marks that make it look more rock-like. Do you see that? And so up here, let's use the palette knife instead, just to see. So same sort of thing. Yep, it works in very similar fashion. So I'm just doing it so that I can get what looks sort of like, you see those shapes in there, so that it doesn't look, it looks a little more angular, which is in fact the way the rocks are anyway. Now, while that is drying, because you're going to put several layers on the rocks, okay, in order to get those rocks to look more dimensional, especially down near the water. It's going to be darker. Let me show you here in nature. See how it's darker along the edge here and darker along the edge here. So we're going to keep going darker, darker, darker with our layers for the rocks. Now, though, I'm going to start coming into the water. Love it. So the generally when the water is breaking over the rocks in this area right here, what'll happen is the water will be thinner, so it'll be a little bit lighter, a little bit greener. Yes, Flower Gazer said, great tip with the card. I'll try that. Thank you. So, um, so with the water that's up near the front here, we want it to be a little bit lighter and greener. And then as we move back here, you can see it's a little bit darker right there at the horizon line, right? So I'm going to start back here at the horizon line, and I want something that's a little bit darker. So the colors that I have that are darker are my ultramarine blue, my phthalo blue, my indigo blue, right? I'm probably going to stay right in this area with the ultramarine blue and the manganese blue. So we're going to do a mix because those are going to look very water-like. So let's see, where am I? 1, 2, 3, 1. There's the ultramarine right there. So I'm going to grab some ultramarine right there. And the nice thing is you don't necessarily have to clean up your colors. Right? Because they just dry on here like that. And then all you need is water to reactivate them later. So that's what I'm doing here. I just, la la la, I just create another mix. And I can see I need more water on my brush because I'm not. The nice thing I find about the core watercolors, besides the fact that the color explodes, and I love that, is that the colors re-wet very easily. So actually, let me see if I have my water spray bottle. Normally what I'll do, these are Daniel Smith watercolor sticks. And so since I'm pulling them out of here, I might as well tell you about them. This is watercolor in stick form. So it's like when you have a pan from the manufacturer, but it's in a stick. And so I like using white and buff titanium, but they don't need to take up a spot in my pans. Instead, I can get the sticks like these from Daniel Smith. And remember, I'll put a link to these in the description of my video later tonight after the show's over. And so you can just use them right from the stick. You can either take it right off the stick with your brush, or you can go into your pan, your mixing area here. So I can get the end of this white wet, and I can go right in here and mix the white right in with that color like that. And then this just wipes right off. So since I don't use white and buff titanium very often, to me, it's perfect to have them in a stick, and then see, they just sit right there, right? Right in the middle. And they don't get in the way that way. And they don't take up one of my pans. So anyway, that's how I'm using those right now. I do like the sticks for that. Okay, so let's take this ultramarine blue. Right next to the ultramarine blue is phthalo blue, and that has a little more green in it. So let me grab some of that. And then this is the manganese. So when I'm painting, I'm always grabbing different colors and just mixing them together. That way, your art will have sort of a unique look to it that becomes your own from the way that you color mix, instead of just taking straight colors right from the palette here. But you can do that too if you prefer to stay right in line with the color. But most of the time, most artists are mixing, and then that becomes sort of your signature, right? So what I want to do here is I'm putting the color along here, but I don't necessarily want it to be like just a straight line across. um, I want to get some variation in here and vary my brush strokes, which is why I really like this big one right here. Okay, so you can see there's variation in the brush strokes. Plus, you can see it's beginning to bead up on the wax. So if I want to preserve the wax, that those splashes, then I need to come in here and pick up some of that color so that I'm preserving some of the white. So that's beginning to give me that color in the background, right? And then I want to lighten it, begin to lighten it. So I'm going to take some of that cobalt teal and mix it in there. So it begins to give it a little bit more of a green aqua type feel. Now again, just swiping, little swipes like this along the top here, so that I'm getting some different color in there. The color's not all the same then. Okay. I am going to sort of bring this along right here just so that I have a horizon line. There we go. And I'm going right on top of some of that other dark blue. And you know what, y'all? It's also okay to have white. It's okay to have the white peek through. You don't have to always cover the whole thing. And now, since this has a little bit of that aqua on it, I'm going to bring some of that aqua into here, right? Okay, so I'm beginning to build that up, and I'm actually going to let that dry because I want to go back to the rocks right now. So let's go in and let's pick up some of that color that's on the white so that we can have preserve the white in there. Because you'll find the thicker your paint is, meaning the more color you're pulling up, the more it's going to want to stick to that white wax. And so I find I do have to go back in there and I have to be like, no, no, I want that white wax to show y'all. There we go. But you can see it. And as it dries, you'll see it even more. You'll see that the movement of where you scribbled the wax, right? Now, let's go ahead and work some more on the rocks, and then we're going to come to this area up closer to us, which will be that sort of light aqua green, right? Colors. So let's go ahead and mix some more brown. Ooh, there's a lot of blue on my brush, so but I can already see, oh yeah, look, there's a horizon. There's my clouds. Yay. And then you can always come back later and put little birds in with a marker or something, right? In the distance. Oh, okay. So what are we doing? We're working on the rocks again. So the one in the back is actually going to be a little lighter color. No, I'm looking in the picture. It's actually a little bit darker over here. So let's get our brown again. This time I'm going to introduce some of that Indian yellow because it's just so luscious and it has an orangey look to it. And then I'm also going to, this time I have a color that natural umber color right here is brown. So it's like, okay, here's where I'm going to start to bring some of that brown in. But I also like that red oxide a lot. So I'm going to throw some of the red oxide in there. And now I'm beginning to get a little bit deeper color for the rocks. Yay! A little bit more of that red. Love the red oxide. Okay, cool. I will have a list of these colors that I'm using in the description of the video on YouTube uh, later. So this one, I'm gonna just, again, you're just making some little movements, some little marks, and you don't worry about it too much because what? I'm gonna run the thing, I'm gonna run my card or my palette knife through it, but you're just trying to get yourself some spots. All right, here we go. Let's use the card. See, I'm doing it a little bit early. I should wait just a little bit because it seems like if you do it right away, then it all pools. Like a lot of the color pooled right there. And there's some of the wax coming up in the paper. Oh, it also depends on the paper how often you can scrape it. Yeah, that does matter as well. Okay, let's take some more of that color and we'll just come in here and dab, 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 dab the color in. And I can see that there's a lot of the white splash right there. And I can see my line, so I'm going to try to get it up near that line right there. Dab, dab, dab. It's okay to let some of that green show through. Give it a moment. There's a different, let me see. I like these are rounded palette knife heads. And for doing scraping, I like the ones that look more like a diamond on the head like that. So that's the one that I'm going to do now. Is I'm just going to, because I like the edge, the way the edge works better. Yes, I'm ripping into the paper. It's okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. So that's the second coat or the third coat of color on the rocks. There's going to be one more coat on the rocks building up. But you can already start to see the painting come alive, right? You're already beginning to see the what it's supposed to look like. Yay. Okay. So let's go ahead and do more of the water in here then. We're going to get a little greener and we're going to get a little bit so more of the turquoisey aqua kind of colors. I need to get all that brown out of there. Brown and green. Okay, so I need to bring a lot more of the cobalt teal into here, right? Ooh, beautiful cobalt teal like this. So now I can just take the cobalt teal on my brush and start incorporating it into, and because these are waves, I like to do a stroke up and a stroke down like that, kind of create a little upside down V. And the reason is because that's kind of the way that a wave looks, right? A wave goes up and down like that. So I like to sort of mimic that shape. And I'm not covering all of the blue. I'm just bringing some of it in because we're just going to layer, 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 and layer ourselves away and just have fun with this, right? Now I'm actually going to add some, I'm going to add some green to this, but we're beginning to see that sort of aqua, right? So closer to me here, normally in landscapes, what's farther away is actually lighter. But with an oceanscape, because the ocean way in the background is normally kind of dark in the background, and then as it comes closer to you, it's not as deep, right? The ocean farther away is deep, so that's why it's darker. And up closer, it's more shallow, so that's why you get these lighter colors up in here. Now, before I go too far, I want to tap, tap, tap those areas where the wax is and make sure that I don't have too much covering the wax, that the wax can show through, right? Okay, wax. All right, wax. There we go. And then let's add a little more sort of green into there. So my favorite mixing green is called phthalo green. So it's right here, right there, phthalo green. But there's something, it's different companies call it different things. So let me look in my bag here and find it for you. What I'm looking for is PG7. That is the pigment color. Okay. So let me find my phthalo green. There it is. So different names. Some call it emerald green. Some call it, well, there's phthalo green. I'm trying to think of what some of the other companies call it. I don't remember off the top of my head, but what you want to do is when you're looking on a label, you're not only looking for the name of the paint. So this says phthalo green, but you look right here for what is the color code. So there's a whole, uh, there's several color libraries on the internet that tell you what these different color codes are. So P stands, this is PG7. P stands for pigment, G is green, and then 7 is a numbering system. So you can actually go out and look um, on those indices and see exactly what the makeup is of this PG7 and the chemical makeup. But I just know that PG7, it's a very artificial looking green, but it's great for color mixing. So I always want to have, I have my yellow, blue, red for color mixing, and then I want a PG7 also, because that's how you can get all kinds of beautiful turquoises and things with your PG7. So just by combining, here's phthalo blue right here, and then a little bit of that phthalo green. Now you've got a very marine-like green. So it's a similar color to that cobalt teal, but it's more, it has a little bit more green in it than the cobalt teal is a little more blue, more tealy looking. So I'm just bringing some of that down in here. Yee, I need something up in there. Brush strokes, brush strokes. There we go. So now we've got a little bit more there. And it's okay that there's not a lot of color right here because I'm going to be spattering that with some of the bleed proof white, right? So we're going to go back in, we're going to tap again, tap, 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 tap to get some of that off of the white. Those colors I just put in there to maintain my white. Nice. So to me, that's very energetic. It has a lot of movement to it. And you can see the brush strokes, and I think that's fabulous because that is it's the hand or the mark of the artist. All right, now over here, right along the edge, I want to darken just this area right here, right up next to the rock, because generally the rocks come down and there's a shadow along there. So I actually want to use a little bit a darker blue. And so this is my ultramarine blue. So some of the blue that's in the background here, I'm just going to lightly drop some of it in right along the line where the rocks are, because right up next to that rock, there's going to be a shadow on the water. And so I'm just bringing some of that blue in there. Let's tap some of it back off. So only a little bit of it remains. There we go. So that's going to give you the illusion of the shadow right there next to the rocks. There we go. And now I can also do that, but it's a little too dark. So I need to bring some of that cobalt teal in, because the closer rock, it's not going to be quite as dark, right? So I do want some, but I just combined it with some of that other, some of the other colors on my palette there. Let's just bring some more of that in. Hey, okay. I feel very happy with that now. Let's, I'm just coming up along the rock and getting the rock a little bit more defined. Okay, yay. So I'm liking where the water is going. Let's tap some of that color off that I just put on. There we go. Nice. Let's go back to the rocks now again, because I need to darken them again. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm looking to, I want this area right here, which is down near the water. I want that to be the darkest, there and there. And then I'm going to imagine that there are some crevices in here. So if you look in here, you see how you have some dark areas, some crevices, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm going to do now. And so I want a very dark color. And I'm pulling from the natural brown umber right now, which is a darker color. And if I want the color to be really dark, I come into Payne's gray. So let me show you that on the color card. You see this Payne's gray? Payne's gray is a dark blue, but super dark. So if I ever want to quickly darken my browns, I just grab a tiny bit of Payne's gray and throw that in there, and boom, I'm darkening it and bringing it more to a sort of a sepia color instead of a brown color. So initially, I'm just going to put this right along here, along the bottom, give it a little bit of dimension. And I'm just tapping it so I can get this variation of the brush strokes right there, right? And then I'm going to start putting in some crevices and things. So I'm just sort of looking at my reference picture and seeing, huh, okay, so where can I put some dark in there that'll kind of give me an idea that there's some dimension there. There's a little bit over here, but this is impressionistic. So I'm just uh, imagining a little bit, like totally thinking out of the box and not getting it exactly right. Like you might look at that and go, as you're painting it, you might think, oh my goodness, that's like, what the heck does that look like? But it's okay. It's okay, because when you look at it as a whole, then it makes sense. Okay. So I am going to see if I can just scrape just a little bit of that, just a little bit, to get some variation out of it. Not a lot, just a little. Okay. It's a good technique, right? I know Flower Gazer earlier was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. Okay, so for the one in the back, I just added a little bit more water because the one in the back, generally the one in the back is a little bit lighter than the one that's right next to you. So I don't want the one in the back to be as noticeable. I do want some of the dark there, but I don't want it to be as to draw your eye as much as the one that's right here in the front. So we got that. Let's put some more of the dark colors in here. Just sort of drop that in. There we go. And then I want to sort of scrape that along there a little bit, just to get some more dimension going there. There we go. So I'm happy with that, but I've got to tap it, right? Because I want to leave some of that white splash there. Okay, good, good, good. Now you can just, as that dries, you can come back and add more to the rocks if you wanted to. Um, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some splashy splashies right now. Okay. Because to me, I'm happy with where that is as a base, where the rocks are, and the colors that I have in here make me very happy, 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 happy. So now we're going to have some splashing going on, and we can get really crazy with the splashes. The first thing I'm going to do with the splashes before I get this to the sparkle, I like to put my white splashes in. So this is, as I said, the Doc Martens bleed proof white. Or the other thing I do is I take, this is a Winsor Newton gouache. So if I'm using gouache, there's white right here right now. I just take some of the gouache, which is just opaque watercolor, and I put it into the one of the mixing wells here. And then I'm going to use my toothbrush, and I'm just dipping it in some clean water right now. And I'm going to mix around. You don't want too much water in there, so it's a little too goopy. You want to maintain that so it looks like a heavy cream. You want it to be so that the thickness is kind of like a heavy cream. Okay. So I need a little bit more of the gouache. That always happens. I always get too much water and then I have to add more gouache, but that's fine. So there's a little bit more gouache. So your gouache should be kind of thick and goopy. Okay. So like I said, that is gouache. Gouache is just a thick, opaque watercolor. So now I'm getting it on my brush like this. Yes, your hands are going to get wet. I mean, dirty. So I think I'm going to put a glove on because it gets a little messy when you're doing the spattering. There we go. And so I've got this opaque gouache in my toothbrush. Now, I think I need just a little bit more. And hey, if you're over on YouTube watching, if you could give the stream a like, I got thumbs up, that would be awesome. Thank you. Appreciate y'all over there on YouTube. Okay, here we go. This is a little bit thicker. That's better. So we've got that nice thick, like heavy cream consistency. Now here I'm going to be turning this, but I also want to move my palette and my paints and things out of the way because I'm going to be getting white everywhere. So I'm just going to move that out of the way and start. Now I want the spatter to go, see how I want it to go this way? This way. That's as it goes up against the rock, it's going to go in that direction. So as I flick this with my fingers, I want it to sort of go like that. There we go. Nice. Fab. So can you see the little dots there? starting to appear. Now, I find that I usually, the gouache, a lot of times, depending on how wet the gouache is, the gouache will begin to reactivate the wet paint underneath. And oftentimes, what will happen is that the blue or the green will begin to come up into the gouache and color the gouache. And that's why I like to use Dr. Martin's bleed proof white, which I'll show you next. But I am going to put just a little bit more in there and a little bit more in there. Okay. So see how you're going to end up with white all over you, which is why I like to which is why I like to do it um without anything else around and put a glove on. There we go. So let me, so that was with the gouache on here. And so now I'm going to get a lot of the water out of the toothbrush and I'm going to go into the bleed proof white. So this bleed proof white from Dr. Martin's, Dr. PH Martin's, the nice thing about it is that it's much thicker than the gouache and it's designed to not have bleed through. So, oop, let me get a new, I maxed out that paper towel right there. Let me get a new paper towel. So, usually what I'll do with my bleed proof white is I start out by mixing it. So, let me find a little stir stick here and I'm going to mix it. If it gets too thick over time, like mine's beginning to get thick, then you can just use a little dropper like this. And I have some clean water right here. Yeet. So I'm just going to get a little bit of clean water, put a couple of drops in there. There we go. And to loosen it up, but you don't want it to be too loose. You just want it to be loose enough so that it's not, pulling on your stick too badly. There we go. So now you see that? Ah, see how that looks? Nice. Now that is a bleed proof white. And I'm going to do the same thing with that. Let me use a little cup. So instead of putting it onto my palette, I'm going to use one of these little, ooh, something just fell over. Okay. I'm just going to use a little, like color mixing cup. And let's put some of it in there. Let's put some of it in there like that. There we go. And then I'm going to use damp, my damp brush. And just go like that, clean off the stick. Yay. Because I want it in the hairs of the brush anyway, right? There we go. This I'm going to put in the other water right there. So here we go. Now we don't want it to be too goopy. It's a little bit goopy right now. So I am going to grab just a tiny bit more water. So you do want it to where it's going to come off of the end of the brush when you flick it. Let me see if it's going to come off the brush. Mm, okay, not enough. So I need just a tiny bit more water in there. So you want enough so it'll flick. Yep, now I'm getting it flicking off the brush. You want to maintain it. It's one of those Goldilocks moments. You want it to be you want it to be wet enough that it'll come off of the brush, but dry enough that it won't like have all of that watercolor underneath it pop up, right? Okay, so here we go. Oops. Now I just got a big blop there. No worries. It's water based, so I can just use my paper towel here and pick it up where it blopped down on there. Not a problem. So, yeah. Woo, a lot more. You get a lot more satisfaction to me out of the bleed proof white. Oh yeah. There we go. It goes on like thicker and gives you a really nice splash pattern. I'm going to do a little bit here. So you can see a lot of activity right there. So do you see that? It's giving me more bang for the buck for my splashes. Yeah, there we go. I even have it going up into the clouds. It's awesome. Let me do a little bit more on the rock over here. So you can play with it until you get the splash pattern that you want. Nice. I like it. I like it. Oh, makes me so happy. Now I'm going to put this in here. Yee, and clean the white up a little bit. And then we're going to do some of the shimmer. So the shimmer watercolors. All right. So to do the shimmer watercolors, you could use your toothbrush to do a shimmer watercolor, but I like to just use a brush to do my shimmer watercolor. And so what you want is you want a brush that has a flexible head to it. So this is a Velvet Touch stroke brush, but it has a lot of movement in the head like that. And so I'm going to show you how I use that in just a second. Let me just seal that back up. So now I'm going to, let me put away my, bye-bye. I'm putting away those right now, the core watercolors. And this is the Starry Night from Gansai. That's the Gansai Tambi by Kuretake Starry Colors. So we're going to start with that. And this white gold, I love the white gold. So let's get some, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my little dropper bottle again. And I like to put a few drops of water in with the colors that I think I'm going to use. And that will activate them. So here we go. This is the white gold, they call it. White gold. So it's a beautiful shimmer color. And white shimmer. So now the way that you get it off of the brush and make sure that you have a nice concentration of the sparkle on there. And then you're going to grab another brush and you're going to tap. So again, you're going to want to move your artwork into the, like if I want it to go this way, I'm going to move the artwork around so that I can get it to go the way that I want it. Okay. And it's not going to look like much right now when I'm tapping it, but later when it's dry, you're going to see some incredible sparkle. That's what it's going to do for you. So, and you probably can't see it, but right here on my paper, I have tons of sparkle right there. Tons of white sparkle. So I like this white, especially because when the sun is glinting off of the water, you get that sort of white sparkle. Okay, that's it. Let me put a little bit more of it up here and a little bit more up here. Okay, so that's it right now for that one. That's this white gold. Now what I'm going to do is grab some of the yellow gold. Why not? This one's champagne gold because it's kind of a tawny gold, so it has a look similar to the rocks. So what I can do, I can even come in here and if I want it to look like the sun is glinting off the rocks, I can actually come in and just like add little bits of it to the rocks to the top. So then it'll look like the sun is shining off of the top of the rocks. That's kind of fun, right? And in addition to putting it on the top of the rocks like that, I'm also going to spatter a little bit of it. So let's take this, make sure there's enough water on there. You'll have to just practice with it to know how much is the right amount. And then let's put a little bit of it down here. So it looks like it's sort of almost the rocks peeking through underneath there. And then a little bit over here. That way it's just going to look like little rocks peeking through. Okay. So now we've got a little bit of that gold going. Ah, and then for me, the pièce de résistance is the aqua color. So let me go ahead and grab. So this particular set has what they call their golds, and then they call this sparkle white their white gold. However, they also have other pearlescent colors. The same company, Kuretake, the Gansai Tambi, they have these pearlescent colors that are other colors like pink and blue and green. Okay, so that would be a good alternative. Now, I showed you earlier that I have this whole palette of um, handmade and CSY uh, sparkle watercolors. So I'm going to grab one of those right now. I like this Aegean. You can see I've used quite a bit of it. And another one that I like over here is the lagoon, that kind of lagoon green. Maybe we'll try the lagoon green right now. So you're going to have to add some water to it and work it, work it, work it to get the sparkle to come up. So there we go, working it to get sparkle into my brush. I might need a little bit more water to be sure it'll come off the brush. There we go. You want it to be nice and juicy. So this is just a sparkle. It's watercolor base with mica in it, different colors of mica. So here's my lagoon. And let me set it aside because I don't want it to get spatter over all the other colors, right? Okay, so there's the lagoon color. Spatter this in here. When you really see it is later when your painting is dry and you hold it up to the light, then you really see all this sparkle. All right, let's bring it over here some more. Nice. Now, because the background is essentially the same color, it's difficult to see that color, but it will, um, when it's dry and you do this, you'll really be able to see the sparkle is fabulous. Now, the next one I want is a darker blue. So I'm going to use that. I usually use the peacock blue. Let me see if I can show it to you here. The peacock blue, because it's a combination of blue and green right there. So let's get some of that one right here. And I'm just going to juice it up with a bunch of water. Nice. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's do it. Let's see what we get. Oh, my goodness. I like this color because it, since it's a little more blue, it shows up a little bit more. There we go. But it adds that little bit of extra darkness to some of this, little extra drama, that darker blue. So let's just do that. And lots of sparkle. Oh my goodness, I love my sparkle. Okay. Add a little bit more there. Perfect. Lovely. There you go. Now, once that's dry, you'll be able to see like incredible sparkle. Now, I've got some of the brown up here. What is that? That is not brown. That's just, I don't know what that is, but let's get that off of there. Yay. Thank you, needle tool. Comes in handy, right? Oh, but this is just splashy, splashy goodness. To me, that, I don't know about y'all, but that makes me so happy just to see that. But that is it for the lesson part of the show. So if you came to watch the lesson, I appreciate you being here. And thanks so much for uh, participating. And I hope you enjoyed that.